The husband laughed as she stood alone in court. Then the doors opened. Character Bible. Eleanor Voss-Ashford, the wife heroine. Age, 34. Height, 5'7". Eleanor carries herself with the quiet, unhurried elegance of a woman who has never needed to announce herself in a room, because rooms have always known she was there, even when she wished they didn't. Her face is oval and classically structured, sharp cheekbones, a soft jaw, a mouth that curves naturally downward when she is thinking deeply, giving her an expression that others mistake for sadness but is actually precision. Her hair is dark chestnut, thick and long, worn today in a low, understated chignon at the nape of her neck, not styled for drama, but styled for discipline. Her eyes are her most arresting feature, gray-green, luminous, the color of still water before rain. They absorb everything. They betray nothing. Her skin is warm ivory with faint undertones of gold from years spent in private gardens and sunlit libraries. Her body type is slender but not fragile. There is a stillness in the way she holds herself, the stillness of deep roots. Today she wears a charcoal gray wool dress, perfectly fitted, deliberately unadorned, with a single strand of antique pearl at her throat that once belonged to her grandmother. No rings, no watch. The absence of jewelry is not poverty. It is a statement. Her emotional state contained grief wrapped in iron dignity. She has cried, but not here. Never here. Marcus Voss, the ex-husband/antagonist. Age, 41. Height, 6'1". Marcus was handsome once, in the way that certain men are handsome when they are still becoming themselves. Now, at 41, the handsomeness has calcified into something colder, a face that is all angles and advantage, a jaw that juts when he is confident, which is always. His hair is sandy brown, swept back with product, the kind of hair that says, "I have a personal stylist, but want you to think I don't." His eyes are pale blue, sharp, calculating, the color of shallow water that pretends to be deep. He is tall, broad-shouldered, and he uses every inch of his height deliberately, leaning into spaces, taking up physical room as if it is his birthright. Today he wears a charcoal Brioni suit with a gold pocket square. He dressed for victory. His attorney sits close beside him like a shadow with a briefcase, his emotional state, arrogant triumph. He has already written the ending of this story in his mind, and in that ending, Eleanor is a footnote. He is wrong. Daphne Hartwell, Marcus's attorney. Age, 52. Height, 5'9". Angular, immaculately groomed, silver-streaked hair pulled so tight it seems to be responsible for the severity of her expression. She wears a steel blue power suit and reads people like balance sheets, with total clinical detachment. She is dangerous because she is competent and because she genuinely does not care who she hurts. Raymond James Ashford, Eleanor's father/the patriarch. Age, 67. Height, 6'3". A man who was built by decades of quiet, absolute authority. Silver-haired, broad through the shoulders, with hands that look like they have signed treaties and studied children with equal ease. His face carries the particular dignity of a man who has never had to raise his voice to be heard. He wears a deep navy bespoke suit, a white pocket square folded with mathematical precision, and a watch that is older than the marriage it is about to end. His eyes, gray-green, identical to Eleanor's, are today glacial with barely restrained fury. He walks the way ships move, with displacement and inevitability. Constance Eleanor Ashford, Eleanor's grandmother / the matriarch. Age, 84. Height, 5'4". Small, luminous, and utterly terrifying. Constance Ashford moves with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who has outlived every enemy she has ever made and found it deeply satisfying. Her white hair is pinned in a perfect Gibson roll. Her face is deeply lined and extraordinarily beautiful, the face of a woman whose history is written in her bones. She wears a black Chanel suit with a brooch at her lapel, a diamond starburst that refracts light like a quiet threat. Her eyes are Eleanor's eyes, 50 years further along, and they carry in them something Marcus Voss has never encountered in his life: absolute, unimpressed, aristocratic contempt. She uses a carved ivory walking cane not because she needs it, but because she enjoys the sound it makes on marble floors. Eleanor's legal team, revealed in Act 2. 3 attorneys in slate gray suits, led by Thomas Fairfield, 58, former federal judge, silver-bearded, unreadable as stone, carrying a leather document case that costs more than Marcus's car. Section 1. The Lonely Stand. 395. A single pair of heels on marble. Slow. Steady. Echo-heavy. The writ room of Hargrove County Superior Court. 9:47 in the morning. The light falls through high windows in pale, indifferent columns. The gallery is filled, not with supporters, but with observers. People who came to watch something end. The doors close behind her. Eleanor Voss-Ashford walks to the plaintiff's table, alone. No attorney beside her. No family in the gallery. No hand at the small of her back. Nothing but the sound of her heels on marble and the weight of 60 pairs of eyes measuring what they assume is her defeat. She sets down a single leather portfolio, pulls out her chair. Sits. Her spine does not curve. Her chin does not drop. She folds her hands on the table in front of her, those elegant, ringless hands, and she looks forward. At the bench, at nothing, at everything. From across the aisle, from the defendant's side, overflowing with attorneys, associates, a paralegal with a rolling cart of documents, Marcus Voss turns and looks at her. And he smiles. It is not a kind smile. It is the smile of a man who believes the game is already over, who has already framed the trophy in his mind and chosen the wall it will hang on. He leans toward his attorney, Daphne Hartwell, and murmurs something. She doesn't smile. Daphne Hartwell never smiles in courtrooms, but she makes a small dismissive sound and turns a page in her brief. In the gallery, Marcus's sister shifts forward, eyes moving over Eleanor with open pity. She came alone. Someone whispers behind a hand. Can you imagine? Eleanor hears it. She does not react. She opens her portfolio to a single sheet of paper, reads it once, closes it, sets her hands back on the table, and she waits. Because Eleanor Voss-Ashford, née Ashford, has spent 34 years learning that the most powerful thing a woman can do in a room full of people who underestimate her is let them. The Aleph calls the court to order. The judge enters. The proceedings begin, and no one in this room, not yet, knows what is already in motion outside these doors. Section 2. The Abandoned Wife. 701 Camp, 10:14 a.m. Courtroom proceedings underway. Daphne Hartwell rises from her chair with the controlled elegance of a blade being unsheathed. She buttons her jacket. She smooths her already smooth lapel. And she begins. Your Honor, the facts of this case are, I am pleased to report, remarkably simple. She pauses. Lets that word, simple, float across the room and settle over Eleanor like dust. Mrs. Voss entered this marriage with limited personal assets. She signed a prenuptial agreement in full knowledge of its terms. She made no substantive financial contribution to the marital estate, and she is now, 7 years later, claiming an entitlement to assets she had no meaningful role in building. A murmur moves through the gallery like a small, cold wave. Eleanor's jaw tightens, barely. A muscle, a flicker, gone. She has no attorney to object, no voice beside her to push back. She sits with her single portfolio and her single sheet of paper, and she writes one word in the margin of a notepad with a fine point pen. Patience. Hartwell continues, and with every sentence she grows more assured, more expansive, feeding on the silence from the other side of the aisle. Mrs. Voss chose not to pursue professional development during the marriage. She chose to delegate financial management entirely to my client. She chose, in essence, to be dependent, and now she seeks to be rewarded for that dependency. Chose. The word used 3 times in 30 seconds is not accidental. Hartwell is not merely making an argument. She is constructing a portrait of a woman who is passive, adrift, without agency or architecture. A woman who is no one's priority and no one's problem to protect. The judge peers briefly at the plaintiff's table. Mrs. Voss, you are representing yourself today? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice is low and even. It does not waver. But the judge's expression shifts, barely, into the particular kind of professional concern that is only 1 degree removed from pity. Are you aware of the complexity of the financial instruments at issue in this case? I am, Your Honor. And you've had opportunity to secure legal representation? I have considered my options carefully, Your Honor. The judge nods slowly and makes a note. It is not a warm note. It is the note of a man making a record that he gave her the chance to protect herself, and she did not take it. In the gallery, the whispers multiply. I heard her family washed their hands of her. She signed that prenup like a child. What did she think was going to happen? Marcus told David she refused every settlement offer. Can you believe it? She has nothing, and she refused. Marcus sits at his table with his large hands resting on the polished wood, and he radiates something that isn't quite joy, but is adjacent to it. He catches the eye of a colleague in the gallery, a fellow businessman, expensive suit, thin smile, and he gives a small nod. The nod of a man who has already won. Hartwell moves to exhibits. Large printed financial documents are wheeled on a display board. Columns of numbers, asset valuations, corporate holdings. The deliberate, dizzying complexity of a wealthy man's estate, arranged specifically to be impenetrable to a woman sitting alone with a notepad. Your Honor, the total marital estate, net of premarital assets, is documented here in Exhibit 17. Mrs. Voss's legal claim amounts to, Eleanor writes another word on her notepad. Soon. She underlines it once. She does not look at the exhibit. She does not look at Hartwell. She does not look at Marcus, who is looking at her with the steady, satisfied attention of a man watching the last of something dissolve. She looks at the high windows, at the pale columns of light, at the dust moving slowly through the morning air, unhurried, going exactly where it intends to go. Outside these walls, on the stone steps of Hargrove County Superior Court, 3 black cars have just arrived, and inside one of them, an 84-year-old woman is straightening her brooch in the reflection of a window. She is not in a hurry either. Section 3. The Hidden Bloodline. 812. Intercut. A memory. Soft light. A different room. A different time. Naibai Mukano Kraminaike. I'm a library. Walls of books. The smell of leather and something older, cedar, perhaps, and the particular quiet of money that has been in a family long enough to stop needing to announce itself. Eleanor is 22 years old in this memory. She is sitting across from her grandmother, Constance Eleanor Ashford, at a desk the size of a small country, and Constance is watching her with those gray-green eyes that have seen a century's worth of human foolishness and remain somehow undiminished by it. There will come a time, Constance says, setting down her teacup with the precise click of someone who has been setting down teacups in rooms like this for 60 years, when someone will look at you and see nothing. No name. No history, no weight. They will look at you, Eleanor, and they will see an ordinary woman standing alone. Young Eleanor meets her grandmother's eyes. What do I do when that happens? Constance smiles, and it is a smile that belongs to no single decade. It is ancient and patient and faintly, gloriously dangerous. You let them. She says, you let them see exactly what they want to see. And then, when the moment is exactly right, She lifts her teacup again, unhurried. You show them what you are. Return to present. The courtroom. The light, the hum of proceedings. The Ashford name is not a famous name, not in the way of names that appear on buildings and tabloid covers. It is a quiet name. Quiet in the way that deep water is quiet. Quiet in the way that the foundation of a very large building is quiet, present in everything, seen by no one, holding everything up. Raymond James Ashford, Eleanor's father, built the name's modern chapter. He is the chairman of Ashford Capital Group, a private equity institution whose portfolio spans 6 continents and whose discretion is so absolute that most people who benefit from its investments never know the source. He is not a man who appears in profiles. He does not give interviews. He sits on boards whose membership lists are not published. He has 3 honorary doctorates and has declined all of them, because he considers the acceptance of public accolades a form of imprecision. He has 1 daughter. Her name is Eleanor. And when Eleanor called him 11 months ago and told him what Marcus had done, told him with her voice perfectly controlled, the emotion moving underneath the surface like current under ice, Raymond Ashford was quiet for a very long time. And then he said, "Tell me exactly what you need from me." She told him, "Nothing yet, Papa. Not yet. I need him to believe he has won. I need him to be certain of it. Can you trust me to know when the moment is right?" Another long silence. "You sound like your grandmother," he said finally. "I'll take that," she said. The reason Eleanor walked into that courtroom without an attorney, without family, without visible support, was not helplessness. It was architecture. She had spent 11 months in quiet, methodical preparation. She had retained Thomas Fairfield, former federal judge, senior partner at Fairfield, Cole & Marsh, at a retainer that would make Daphne Hartwell's jaw come unhinged. She had documented everything, the commingled assets Marcus had tried to reclassify, the corporate transfers executed 6 months before he filed, the offshore account structure that was not, upon careful examination, nearly as invisible as Marcus believed. She knew things that were not in any exhibit Hartwell had prepared. She knew them because her father's people had found them. And she had chosen to walk into this courtroom alone. To sit alone, to absorb every whisper, every pitying glance, every carefully constructed argument designed to diminish her. Because Marcus Voss had spent 7 years of marriage watching Eleanor be gracious and quiet and largely unconcerning. He had concluded from this that she was unconcerning, that her family was distant, that her resources were his resources, that her only power was the power he had chosen to extend to her and could therefore choose to withdraw. He had made the oldest mistake in the history of powerful men. He had confused restraint with limitation. In the parking structure beneath Hargrove County Superior Court, a man in a slate gray suit opens the door of a black car. Raymond Ashford steps out. He does not look up at the courthouse yet. He straightens his jacket. He looks at his watch. "Give her 5 more minutes," he says quietly. 5 more minutes of standing alone. 5 more minutes of being underestimated. It's what she asked for. He will give her that. Section 4. The Rising Tension. 551, 1 stamp. 11:02 a.m. The momentum in the courtroom has become a living thing. You can feel it, the way air moves differently in a room where one side has all the oxygen. Hartwell has been presenting for 40 minutes. Her exhibits are organized. Her arguments are fluid. Her client sits beside her, radiating the ease of a man who has played this particular sport his whole life and never once been surprised by the score. Marcus leans over and writes something on a legal pad, slides it toward Hartwell. She reads it, makes the smallest upward movement of one corner of her mouth, the closest she gets to warmth. The note says she hasn't objected once, not once. The judge reviews a document, asks a procedural question. Hartwell answers with the smooth efficiency of a machine that has been perfectly calibrated. Eleanor sits. She has been writing on her notepad for 20 minutes. Not case notes, or at least not the kind that belong to this proceeding. She writes in a small, elegant hand. The words are not visible to anyone nearby. She is writing a letter to her grandmother. She does this when she needs to feel steadied. She has done it since she was 9 years old, written letters to Constance that she sometimes sends and sometimes keeps. Constance writes back on ivory stationery with a fountain pen in violet ink. Always. You are right, Eleanor writes now, about letting them see what they want to see. He is so certain. It is almost beautiful, in the way that closed doors are beautiful, completely themselves, completely unaware of what's on the other side. She pauses, writes one more line. It's time, I think. I think it's time now. In the gallery, a woman named Patricia Greer, a journalist who covers financial litigation for the regional broadsheet. Present today because a tip from a source she cannot name told her to be in that courtroom on that morning, has been watching Eleanor with a growing sense of disorientation. Because Patricia Greer has covered enough courtrooms to know the body language of people who are losing. And Eleanor Voss-Ashford does not have it. She has something else entirely. Something that Patricia will later describe in print as the uncanny composure of a woman who is not watching the clock because she already knows what's coming. Patricia glances toward the main doors of the courtroom. They are closed. But there is something, a vibration maybe, or a sound at the edge of sound, that makes her look twice. She is not the only one. The bailiff near the door shifts his weight, glances over his shoulder, turns back, uncertain. In the marble corridor outside, footsteps, not one set, not two. Many. Measured, unhurried, deliberate. The sound of people who have arrived exactly when they intended to arrive, not one moment before, not one moment after. Marcus is speaking quietly to his associate, laughing at something, loose and comfortable and completely unguarded. Eleanor lifts her pen from the notepad, folds her hands on the table, and for the first time since she sat down, she allows herself the smallest, most private, most extraordinary smile. It's time. Section 5. The Final Isolation. 503 ing unsamp. 11:19 a.m. It comes, as these moments always come, not with warning, but with a sudden, terrible intimacy. Hartwell finishes her final exhibit presentation and turns to the bench with the satisfied posture of a surgeon who has just completed a flawless procedure. Your Honor, I believe the documentation speaks comprehensively to our position. At this time, we would invite Mrs. Voss to present her response, if she has one. The last two words are not necessary to the sentence. They are chosen precisely because they are not necessary. Every eye in the courtroom moves to Eleanor. The judge looks at her over his glasses, not unkindly, but with the particular patience of a man who has already anticipated what comes next, a stumbled attempt, a request for continuance, a quiet capitulation dressed in procedural language. Mrs. Voss? Eleanor does not move immediately. She sits for 3 full seconds in absolute stillness, and in those 3 seconds the room makes its final, complete assessment of her. The gallery leans forward, collective breath held, not in anticipation, but in the way people lean toward something they expect to be painful. There is a woman in the 3rd row who closes her eyes briefly, the way you close your eyes when someone is about to say something that cannot be unsaid. Marcus turns fully in his chair to look at her. And his expression, in this moment, is the one that will stay with Eleanor for the rest of her life, not because it hurts her, but because it is so complete. It is the expression of total, absolute dismissal. He is not looking at a woman who was once his wife, who moved through his home and his life for 7 years. He is looking at a problem that is about to resolve itself. His eyes say, "You have nothing. We both know it. Let's be done." Eleanor breathes once. She looks down at her notepad, the letter to her grandmother, the single line, "It's time, I think. I think it's time now." And below it, without planning it, she has written 3 words. They're here, ready. She blinks, looks up, not at Marcus, not at the judge, not at the gallery full of people who have spent the morning writing her off. She looks at the back of the courtroom, at the 2 large doors of carved oak, closed with their brass fittings catching the pale morning light. And Eleanor Voss-Ashford, sitting completely, visibly, undeniably alone, lifts her chin. Not in defiance, not in grief, in recognition. Because she can hear it now, clearly, what the bailiff heard and dismissed and the journalist heard and couldn't name. Footsteps, coming down the marble corridor outside with the measured, unhurried, inevitable pace of a family that has existed for a very long time and intends to continue existing for a very long time more. Coming toward her, coming for her. And they are not, they have never been, late. Section 6. The dramatic family arrival. 1,498 words. The doors open. Not with a bang, not with theater. Not with the forced drama of people who need to announce themselves with noise. They open slowly. One push, smooth on well-oiled hinges, and then both doors swing wide, all the way wide, and the light from the corridor pours into the courtroom like something being released. And then, Raymond James Ashford walks through first. 6'3", silver-haired, navy bespoke suit, white pocket square, the watch that is older than this marriage. He does not look around the room with curiosity or hesitation. He looks at one thing, his daughter's back, straight and still at the plaintiff's table. He walks toward her. Behind him, and this is where the room begins to understand the magnitude of what is happening, behind him walk 3 men in slate-gray suits. Thomas Fairfield, former federal judge, silver-bearded and carrying a leather document case with the relaxed authority of a man who has argued before the Supreme Court and found it only moderately interesting. Beside him, 2 associates who move with the silent precision of people who have been preparing for this moment for 11 months. The gallery erupts in whispers. Not the whispers from before, the small, pitying murmurs of people watching something diminish. These are the whispers of people who have just felt the temperature of the room change. Who? Is that? Wait. That's... Daphne Hartwell turns, and for the first time in this proceeding, for perhaps the first time in a very long time, Daphne Hartwell's face does something unplanned. Her eyes move from Raymond Ashford to the 3 attorneys behind him, and the color, quite visibly, leaves her face. She recognizes Thomas Fairfield. Every serious attorney in this state recognizes Thomas Fairfield. She turns back to her documents, looks at them, looks back at the door. "Your Honor," she begins. But the door is not finished. Because now, the footsteps in the corridor change cadence, slower, more deliberate, with a rhythm that is older and more certain than anything in this room. Tap, step, tap, step. The carved ivory cane comes first, and then Constance Eleanor Ashford enters the courtroom. 5'4", 84 years old, white hair in a perfect Gibson roll, black Chanel suit, diamond starburst brooch at her lapel, catching the courthouse light and breaking it into pieces. She moves with the unhurried authority of a woman who has been the most important person in every room she has ever entered and considers it an irrelevant detail. She does not look at the gallery. She does not look at Marcus. She does not look at anyone who does not matter to her, and at this particular moment, that is almost everyone in this building. She looks at Eleanor. And Eleanor, who has sat for 2 hours and 43 minutes without a single crack in her composure, without a single public display of what this has cost her, turns in her chair, sees her grandmother. A long beat. The kind of beat that belongs to the space between pain and its release. Eleanor's eyes fill. She does not cry. She will not cry here. But the gray-green eyes, identical to the gray-green eyes moving toward her from the back of the room, fill to the brim and hold. Constance does not hurry. She walks down the center aisle of that courtroom the way she has walked through every room of her life, as if she designed it and could redesign it at any moment if the current configuration ceased to please her. She reaches the low railing of the gallery, and Raymond is already there, opening the gate. And Constance Ashford steps through the gate into the well of the court, and she walks to the plaintiff's table. She stands beside Eleanor, puts one hand, small, deeply lined, adorned with a single diamond ring on the right hand, on Eleanor's shoulder. And she looks across the aisle at Marcus Voss, who is no longer leaning back in his chair. Marcus Voss, who has gone very still in the way that animals go still when they have suddenly and catastrophically identified themselves as prey. Marcus Voss, whose pale blue eyes are moving from Constance to Raymond to Thomas Fairfield to the leather document case and back to Constance, and in them is the beginning, just the beginning, the cold first breath of understanding. Raymond Ashford takes his place standing behind Eleanor's chair. Thomas Fairfield sets the leather document case on the plaintiff's table with a sound that is quiet but somehow carries to every corner of the room. "Your Honor," Fairfield says, and his voice, unhurried and resonant with the particular authority of a man who spent 12 years on the federal bench, fills the courtroom like water filling a vessel. Thomas Fairfield. Fairfield, Cole, and Marsh. Appearing on behalf of the plaintiff, Mrs. Eleanor Voss-Ashford, and requesting the court's permission to present a response to the defendant's exhibits, along with a submission of our own. He opens the case. The documents inside are organized in the way that a great deal of very meticulous work over a very long period of time becomes organized, with perfect clarity and devastating completeness. The judge, who is not a man easily moved, blinks. Twice. "Mr. Fairfield," he says slowly, "I was under the impression that Mrs. Voss was representing herself today." Fairfield allows the smallest pause. Mrs. Voss was, Your Honor, allowing the defendant to develop his complete confidence in that impression. And moves through the gallery. Not a whisper this time. A wave. A surge. The sound of 60 people simultaneously recalibrating what they thought they knew. The journalist, Patricia Greer, is writing so fast her pen is a blur. Marcus's sister has both hands pressed to her mouth. Marcus's colleague, the one who received the satisfied nod 40 minutes ago, is leaning so far forward in his seat that he is in danger of toppling into the row ahead. And Marcus himself. Marcus himself is a man standing on a floor that has just been revealed to be glass, looking down through it, seeing for the first time and with complete, shattering clarity exactly how far down the bottom is. His jaw is set. His shoulders are rigid. He is holding himself very still with the desperate self-discipline of a man who knows that everyone in this room is now watching him the way they were watching her 2 hours ago. With assessment, with judgment, with the quiet, collective recalibration of people revising their story. Daphne Hartwell leans toward him and says something in a voice too low to carry. Marcus doesn't respond. He is looking at Constance Ashford. And Constance Ashford, 84 years old, 5'4", with her ivory cane and her diamond brooch and her hand on her granddaughter's shoulder, is looking back at him with an expression that contains no anger, no triumph, no visible emotion of any ordinary kind. It contains something much worse. It contains recognition. The recognition of a woman who has looked at men like Marcus Voss her entire life. who has watched them mistake quietness for emptiness, dignity for weakness, patience for resignation, who has, over 8 decades, watched every single one of them arrive at the same moment, this moment right here, when the floor becomes glass, and who has found, with the deepening of time, that she no longer even experiences surprise, only a kind of old, satisfied, absolute certainty. She leans down, slowly, with the unhurried authority of someone who has never once needed to rush, and she says something to Eleanor. Quietly. Just the two of them. "There she is," Constance says. And Eleanor, who has been waiting 2 hours and 43 minutes and 11 months and perhaps her entire life for this moment, lifts her chin, straightens her spine, though it could not be straighter, unfolds her hands from the table, and turns to Thomas Fairfield. "Please proceed," she says. Her voice does not shake. Her voice, in this moment, sounds exactly like her grandmother's. Section 7. The Powerful Reckoning. 724 RRE. Stamp. 11:47 a.m. The submission Thomas Fairfield places before the court is, to use his own word, comprehensive. It is also, to use the word Marcus's attorney will later use in the parking lot with her hand pressed flat against her car door, devastating. The documents detail 4 separate asset reclassifications executed in the 18 months preceding the divorce filing, reclassifications that moved marital assets into corporate structures ostensibly predating the marriage. They document a series of transfers to a Cayman-registered holding company in the name of a beneficial owner whose name, when peeled back through 3 layers of corporate veil, resolves to Marcus's brother-in-law. They include, moreover, and this is where Daphne Hartwell goes very, very quiet, forensic accounting prepared by a firm whose principal partner consults for the Securities and Exchange Commission. They include the prenuptial agreement, yes, and also a supplemental property disclosure that Marcus signed 3 years into the marriage during a refinancing that constitutes, under the specific language of the state's marital property statute, a partial modification of that prenuptial agreement's asset classifications. Fairfield does not present this loudly. He does not perform. He simply places document after document calmly in the way that a contractor removes a wall, not with drama, but with the complete confidence of someone who knows what is structural and what is not. Marcus watches this unfold with the expression of a man watching water come under a door. He writes something on his pad, crosses it out, writes something else. His pen moves faster and faster, and none of what he writes leads anywhere, because there is nowhere for it to lead. He leans to Hartwell. "Can they? Yes," she says flatly. "But the prenup was modified. By you. 3 years ago. Your signature." Silence. The offshore accounts. They have the full structure. All 3 entities. Marcus's hand, on the table, closes into a fist, and opens, and closes. Raymond Ashford, standing behind Eleanor's chair, watches Marcus with an expression that has not changed since he walked through those doors. It is not gloating. Raymond Ashford does not gloat. He considers it a form of imprecision. It is the expression of a man who arrived where he needed to be at exactly the moment he intended to arrive, and who intends to remain there until the thing is complete. But his eyes, gray-green and entirely his daughter's, are speaking a language that requires no translation. You had her. You had everything she was, everything she carried, everything she came from. You looked at her and saw nothing. And now, look where we are. Marcus turns once to look at the gallery. His sister has her eyes down. His colleague has shifted back in his seat. The room that was arranged an hour ago in the comfortable geometry of his victory has rearranged itself entirely. The weight of it, the center of gravity, has moved cleanly and completely across the aisle. And Marcus Voss, for the first time in perhaps his entire adult life, is sitting in the part of the room that holds less. When the judge calls a brief recess and Hartwell touches Marcus's arm to pull him into a side conference, her voice very low, her words rapid, her tone carrying, for the first time, something that is unmistakably concern, Marcus stands. And for one moment, crossing the well of the court toward the side door, he passes close to Eleanor's table. He looks at her. She looks back. And what Eleanor sees in Marcus's eyes is not what she expected, not the fury, not the deflection, not the narcissistic redirection she has braced for her whole marriage. What she sees is something rawer and more honest than Marcus Voss has ever shown her in 7 years. She sees the moment a man understands, truly, finally, irreversibly understands, that he misread everything. That he read power as its absence, that he read a bloodline as a void, that he read a woman who chose restraint as a woman who had no choice. She does not say anything to him. She simply holds his gaze for 3 quiet seconds, and then she looks away. Because he is no longer the most important person in this room. He may be, she realizes, with a clarity that arrives like light through those high courthouse windows, the least important person in this room. Section 8. Her supported triumph. 4:48 damp, 3:22 p.m. exterior, the stone steps of Hargrove County Superior Court. Afternoon light, warm and long, casting gold across the marble. The settlement is reached before the afternoon session concludes. The terms are not, ultimately, negotiated by Marcus Voss's team from a position of anything resembling strength. Fairfield presents. Hartwell consults. There are phone calls made from the corridor. There is, for 40 minutes, a great deal of activity in rooms where Eleanor is not present. And then it is done. Eleanor walks out of the courthouse at 3:22 in the afternoon, flanked by her father on one side and her grandmother on the other. Thomas Fairfield walks behind them. His document case is slightly lighter than when it arrived. The afternoon light hits the steps, and Eleanor stops. She tilts her face up toward it. She breathes. "You were right," she says quietly. Not to anyone in particular, but Constance hears it. "I usually am," says Constance. "It's a burden." Eleanor laughs, and it is the laugh of a woman who has been holding something in for 11 months and is finally setting it down on solid ground. Raymond puts his arm around his daughter. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. Patricia Greer's piece, published 3 days later, will carry the headline, "The Ashford Harris," on power, patience, and the art of being underestimated. It will be the most read article of the quarter. It will quote no one by name because no one from the Ashford family agreed to be interviewed. This, Patricia will note in her final paragraph, is entirely consistent with the Ashford family's history. They do not seek the spotlight. They move through it, briefly, when it serves them, and then they return to the quiet, immovable, irresistible work of being exactly who they are. Here is what this story asks of each of us today. Never mistake someone's silence for emptiness. Never mistake their patience for resignation. And never mistake the absence of display for the absence of power. Eleanor Voss-Ashford did not win because her family was powerful. She won because she understood with perfect clarity that who you are does not disappear because someone chooses not to see it. The roots do not stop being roots because the storm cannot find them. Now I want to hear from you. Has someone ever underestimated you because of what they couldn't see? Tell me your story below. What would you have done in Eleanor's position? Would you have revealed your support immediately or waited exactly as she did? Who is your Constance? Who is the person in your life whose presence, even from a distance, makes you unafraid? Leave your answers in the comments. This community was built on stories like Eleanor's and like yours. If this episode moved you, If Eleanor's quiet dignity and her family's arrival gave you something, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Karma's Heiress so you never miss the moment the doors open, because they always open. For the right person, at exactly the right time.